September 11, 2001, 19 militants associated with the Islamic extremist group Al-Qaeda hijacked 4 airplanes and carried out suicide attacks against targets in the United States. 2 of the planes were flown into the towers of the World Trade Center in New York City, a 3rd plane hit the Pentagon just outside Washington, D.C., and the 4th plane crashed in a field in Pennsylvania. This was the first major terrorist attack on U.S. soil which exposed the U.S. to the reality of their own vulnerability. Because of the 9/11 terrorist attacks, President Bush changed his foreign policy agenda completely. His goal became combating terrorism. Shortly after the attacks, President Bush announced his agenda to devote every possible resource, from intelligence to law enforcement, to the defeat of the global terror network. Bush described Iraq, Iran, and North Korea as an axis of evil that supported terrorism and sought weapons of mass destruction. He declared that every nation aiding terrorism would be pursued by the U.S. You were either with us or with the terrorists. With this declaration, President Bush changed America's war policies. Preemptive war that is fought before a perceived inevitable attack but without any provocation, was now a tactic used to combat terrorism. The war in Iraq precipitated from Iraq's refusal of UN inspections of the production of weapons of mass destruction, or WMDs, which was a stipulation in the treaty that ended the Persian Gulf War. President Bush issued an ultimatum to Saddam Hussein, the Iraqi leader, stating that Saddam Hussein must step down and leave Iraq within 48 hours, or the U.S. will attack. President Bush was acting on the principles of preemptive war, believing that Iraq's possible ownership of WMDs and aiding of possible terrorists was cause for war. On March 20, 2003, the U.S. invaded Iraq. By May 1, 2003, President Bush reported that all major military operations had been completed in Iraq. On December 4, 2003, Saddam Hussein was captured. No WMDs were found, and the search ended. Shiite Muslims were given control of the Iraqi government on October 25, 2005. However, since the construction of this new Iraqi government, a large insurgency began and created an environment in which terrorism thrived, making the situation worse than before Americans had entered Iraq. Americans were led to believe this was a noble cause, but when pictures from Abu Ghraib surfaced, Americans' doubts severely increased. The picture showed U.S. soldiers torturing Iraqi prisoners in the most foul and disturbing ways. Americans grew uneasy about the war about a year in, and photographs from Abu Ghraib undermined American fundamentals, planted seeds of doubt about the war throughout the American public, and raised questions about civil liberties and basic humanity. Troops began to leave Iraq by 2007, and all troops were withdrawn by 2011. The 8-year occupation killed 4,491 American troops and cost around $2 trillion.
The change in foreign policy as a result of 9/11 produced a new mindset in the United States, which directed all fear onto the Middle East. The newfound safety concerns developed on the basis of racial prejudice focused on the Muslim community. Going to war in Afghanistan only heightened the need for a transition in foreign policy. In the post-9/11 era, President Bush set his sights on toppling the Taliban. Their influence on 9/11 attack was what sparked the militaristic interest from the United States. President Bush and the United States government knew who perpetrated the attacks, and they were willing to take action against this organization. The first phase of this war was focused on the toppling of Al-Qaeda, the fighting which lasted only 2 months. Rather than conclude fighting after the end of this phase, the United States government continued to fight from 2002 through 2008, continuing on through Phase 2. Phase 2 was primarily focused on the defeating of Taliban forces. It was important for the United States to defeat a mentality they viewed as corrupt. With this defeat, they began to focus on the rebuilding of the Afghan state. This was done with the foundation of American ideals, rather than the radical mindsets which the Taliban exhibit. Once Barack Obama became the President of the United States, Phase 3 was enacted. With this, there was a doctrine of counterinsurgency enacted. This began in 2008, which was accelerated with his presidency. The doctrine aligned with President Obama's increase in the presence of U.S. troops in Afghanistan. Troops left Afghanistan on December 28, 2014, once the U.S. and NATO ended their combat mission. After Ashraf Ghani was inaugurated as president in 2014, he signed the bilateral security agreement allowing 13,000 international troops to remain in the country. The events which occurred on 9/11 and the resulting Iraq and Afghani wars produced mass change among the security policy of the United States. The Patriot Act of 2001 and 2003 are a few of many policies enacted to better protect citizens. The USA Patriot Act is an acronym for Uniting and Strengthening America by providing appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorism. It allows branches of government to research and obstruct any person, group, or idea believed to support or advertise any domestic or foreign terrorist activities. As a direct result of 9/11, this act changed the parameters for intelligence collection in the United States. Controversy arose surrounding this act because people viewed it as an invasion of privacy. Implementation of policies such as baggage checks in airports changed the airfare rates as a result of increased security. This change was considered the September 11th fee because it was implemented after the terrorist attack on 9/11.